What if a simple maid could unlock a miracle for a millionaire son? Millionaire catches black maid in the act and can't believe what he sees. Ricardo Wellington never imagined that arriving home 2 hours early from work that Tuesday would change his life forever. The sound coming from his son Daniel's bedroom made him stop in the hallway of the mansion, frowning. It was laughter. Genuine laughter from a 5-year-old child who hadn't shown any joy in months. Daniel had been born with mild cerebral palsy, a condition that mainly affected his leg movements and motor coordination. Since then, Ricardo had buried himself even deeper in work, running from the pain of seeing his only son struggle against limitations that no amount of money could cure. Guilt consumed him silently, turning him into an even more distant and cold man. Approaching the half-open door, Ricardo peeked through the gap and felt the blood freeze in his veins. There was Elena, the maid he had hired 6 months ago, kneeling on the floor next to Daniel. But that wasn't what shocked him. It was what she was doing. Elena was gently holding the boy's little legs, moving them in exercises that looked like professional physical therapy. Daniel laughed as she hummed a soft melody, encouraging him to try to move the muscles on his own. The black woman's hands, calloused from domestic work, manipulated the child's body with a precision and tenderness that Ricardo had never witnessed, even from the most expensive private physical therapists. "Come on, little one. You can lift this leg on your own," Elena murmured sweetly. "Remember what we talked about yesterday. You're a brave warrior." Daniel pushed hard, focusing intensely, and managed to raise his leg a few centimeters. His eyes lit up with pride as Elena clapped enthusiastically. "That's it. You're getting stronger every day. But hold on, what secret was this maid hiding that could turn a broken family around?" Ricardo felt an explosive mix of emotions running through his veins. Anger at discovering that a maid was interfering in his son's medical treatment without permission. Confusion when realizing that Daniel was showing more progress in those few minutes than in months of conventional therapy, and a pang of something he couldn't identify. Maybe envy of the natural bond Elena had established with Daniel. But there was something else even more intriguing about that scene. Elena spoke to Daniel using medical technical terms naturally, as if she had specialized knowledge. How could a simple maid know about specific muscles, tension points, and movement techniques? This mystery disturbed him deeply. Ricardo's wife, Sophia, appeared in the hallway holding a cup of tea. She seemed equally surprised to see her husband home so early, but her expression softened when she heard the laughter coming from the bedroom. "Elena has a special gift with Daniel," she whispered, approaching. "Since she started taking care of him, our son has been showing signs of improvement we've never seen before." Ricardo turned sharply to Sophia, his eyes blazing. "You knew about this? You knew she was doing this?" He gestured toward the bedroom, his voice loaded with tension he couldn't fully decipher. Sophia lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. I noticed some things, yes, but Ricardo, look at how happy Daniel is. It's been so long since he smiled like that." Her words echoed in Ricardo's mind like a punch to the stomach. When was the last time he had really noticed Daniel's progress? When was the last time he had sat on the floor to play with his own son? The guilt that already haunted him intensified, now mixed with anger directed both at Elena and at himself. At that moment, Elena helped Daniel sit on the bed, and the boy hugged her spontaneously. "Thank you, Aunt Elena. Tomorrow, I'll be able to lift both legs at the same time. You'll see." The scene struck a sensitive chord in Ricardo's hardened heart. For years, he had desperately sought something that would bring hope and joy back into Daniel's life. And there it was, happening right under his nose at the hands of someone he had considered just another employee. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to Black Man Notebook to follow more moving stories like this. Now, Ricardo would have to decide what to do with this disturbing discovery that would completely change the dynamics of his family. The next morning, Ricardo couldn't concentrate on any meeting. His mind kept going back to the scene he had witnessed in Daniel's room. He decided to leave early again, this time determined to confront Elena directly. He needed to understand what was happening in his own house. When he arrived, he found Elena in the kitchen preparing Daniel's afternoon snack. She greeted him with a polite smile, but Ricardo noticed a flicker of nervousness in her dark eyes. She knew she had been discovered. "Elena, I need to talk to you," Ricardo said, trying to keep his voice controlled. "It's about what I saw yesterday in Daniel's room." Elena stiffened, her hand stopping in the middle of slicing fruit. "Mr. Ricardo, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you're playing doctor with my son without my permission." Ricardo's voice came out harsher than he intended. "You're not trained for that. You're just a housemaid." The words cut through the air like sharp blades. Elena lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to overstep my limits," but there was something in Elena's behavior that intrigued Ricardo. Despite her apparent submissiveness, he sensed a silent determination in her posture, as if she was guarding an important secret, something that could completely change the situation if revealed. "Where did you learn those techniques?" Ricardo insisted. "Where does a maid learn about physical therapy?" Elena hesitated for a long moment, as if struggling internally between revealing the truth or staying silent. Finally, she murmured, "My younger brother. He was born with similar problems to Daniel's. So what, I took care of him for 12 years, sir. I learned by observing physical therapists, reading books in the public library, watching online videos. My family didn't have money for expensive treatments, so I became his physical therapist." Elena lifted her gaze, and for the first time, Ricardo saw a burning flame of passion in her eyes. "My brother Miguel walks today, runs, plays soccer. The doctors said he would never be able to." The revelation struck Ricardo like lightning. His anger began to mix with something more complex, reluctant respect, and also a stab of shame. That woman had managed with love and dedication to achieve what he with all his fortune had not been able to provide. "For his own son, you had no right to make decisions about my son's treatment without consulting me," Ricardo said, but his voice had lost some of its initial harshness. "You're right, sir," Elena agreed, lowering her eyes again. "But Daniel was so sad, so discouraged. I just wanted to help." At that moment, Daniel appeared in the kitchen, walking with his crutches, but with a radiant smile. "Daddy, you came home early again." "Elena, can I show Daddy what I learned yesterday?" Ricardo looked at his son, noticing something he hadn't seen before. Daniel was visibly more upright, his posture more confident. There was a sparkle in his eyes that Ricardo hadn't seen in a long time. "Daniel, go back to your room. The adults are talking," Ricardo said, more out of instinct than real intention. Daniel's smile instantly faded. Elena bent down to his level. "How about you wait for me in the living room? I'll teach you a new exercise in a few minutes." After Daniel left, Elena turned back to Ricardo with renewed determination. "Mr. Ricardo, I know you see me as just a maid, and maybe that's all I am, but your son is improving. And you know it, improving." Ricardo laughed bitterly. "You saw him for a few minutes. I see Daniel every day for 6 months." Elena interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "I see him crying when he thinks no one is watching. I see him struggling not to disappoint the expensive physical therapists you hire. I see a smart, brave boy who only needs someone who truly believes in him." Elena's words echoed in Ricardo's chest like a silent accusation. When was the last time he had really looked at Daniel? Not just at his limitations, but at his possibilities. "My method may not be as scientific as the professionals," Elena continued, "but it's done with true love, and sometimes that makes all the difference." Ricardo felt a turbulent mix of emotions. On the one hand, his wounded pride resisted the idea that a maid could achieve what expensive specialists could not. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the results he was seeing in Daniel, but there was still another mystery that intrigued him. How did Elena manage to maintain such dedication after working all day taking care of the house? What deep motivation drove her to invest so much time and energy in her employer's son? In the following days, Ricardo began to observe Elena differently, no longer as a simple employee, but as an enigma that needed to be deciphered. He discreetly installed additional security cameras in the house, officially to increase protection, but in reality to monitor Elena's activities with Daniel. What he discovered through the recordings left him deeply disturbed, though not in the way he expected. Elena arrived an hour early every day, without being paid for that extra time. She stayed past her official hours, helping Daniel with motor coordination exercises. On weekends, when she should have been resting, she voluntarily showed up to continue the improvised therapy sessions. Ricardo discovered that Elena had transformed Daniel's room into a sort of home rehabilitation clinic. She used common household objects in creative ways. Pillows became obstacles for balance exercises. Clothing elastics turned into muscle-strengthening equipment, and even plastic bottles filled with sand worked as weights for physical therapy. But there was something more intriguing. Elena kept a detailed notebook recording Daniel's progress. Which techniques worked best? The boy's emotional reactions. It was a record more complete and careful than any medical report Ricardo had ever received from professional physical therapists. One afternoon, Ricardo decided to follow Elena after her shift. He wanted to understand where all that inexplicable dedication came from. Elena took to buses until she reached a peripheral neighborhood of the city where she entered a simple house with an unkempt garden. Ricardo waited on the street for almost 2 hours until he saw her come out, accompanied by a young black teenager, apparently about 15 years old. The boy walked with a slight limp, but his movements were fluid and confident. It was Miguel, the brother Elena had mentioned. Together, they walked to a nearby square where Miguel began to play soccer with other boys. Watching from a distance, Ricardo was impressed by the boy's athletic skill. Miguel not only participated in the game, but stood out, dribbling opponents and scoring goals with an agility that defied any previous physical limitation. He was living proof of the effectiveness of Elena's unconventional methods. Ricardo cautiously approached the court. Elena was sitting on a bench watching her brother play with a proud smile. When she noticed her boss's presence, she became visibly tense. "Mr. Ricardo, what are you doing here?" "Following you," Ricardo replied with brutal honesty. "I wanted to understand why you care so much about Daniel." Elena lowered her eyes, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "I don't know what you want me to say the truth. Why would a housemaid dedicate so much time and energy to her boss's son? What interest do you have in this?" Elena remained silent for a long moment, watching Miguel score another goal. Finally, she sighed deeply. "My brother isn't just my responsibility, Mr. Ricardo. He is my inspiration. When he was little and the doctor said Miguel would never walk normally, I promised myself I would prove them wrong. And you did." "Yes, but it wasn't just because of the physical exercises. It was because I never stopped believing in him. I never let him see himself as limited or different. And when I see Daniel," Elena paused, carefully choosing her words, "I see a boy with the same potential Miguel had, but surrounded by adults who have already given up on him." The words hit Ricardo like a slap. "Are you accusing me of giving up on my own son?" "I'm not accusing anyone, sir. I'm just saying that Daniel needs someone who believes in the impossible." At that moment, Miguel approached, sweaty after the game. "Elena, who is this man?" "He's my boss, Miguel. Ricardo Wellington." Miguel extended his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Wellington. Elena always talks about your work." Ricardo shook the boy's hand, noticing the firmness of the grip and the confidence in his gaze. "Elena told me about you. It's impressive to see how you play soccer. Elena taught me that limitation exists only in our mind." Miguel smiled. "She always said that, if I really wanted something, I'd find a way to make it happen." Ricardo looked at Elena with a new expression, a mix of admiration and shame. He began to understand that he had misjudged not only her abilities, but also her motivations. Elena wasn't trying to impress or get something in return. She simply saw in Daniel an opportunity to replicate the miracle she had achieved with her own brother. But there was still another mystery that intrigued him. During his observations, Ricardo had noticed that Elena sometimes left the house late at night carrying a mysterious bag. Where she went on those occasions, and what she carried in that bag remained an enigma that increasingly fueled his curiosity. The following week, Ricardo decided to follow Elena during one of her mysterious nighttime outings. It was almost 10 at night when she left the house with her usual bag. Ricardo discreetly followed her to a community center in the neighborhood where she lived. The sign at the entrance was faded, "São Pedro Community Rehabilitation Center." Through the window, Ricardo saw something that left him completely speechless. Elena was at the center of an improvised room, surrounded by about 15 children with various physical disabilities. She had transformed that simple space into a volunteer physical therapy clinic using the same creative methods she applied with Daniel. The children called her Teacher Elena and followed her instructions with contagious enthusiasm. The mysterious bag contained homemade physical therapy materials, educational toys, and improvised equipment she had created with her own savings. Elena had dedicated not only her extra hours to Daniel, but also her nights to other children who, like Miguel, did not have access to expensive treatments. Ricardo watched Elena help a 7-year-old girl take her first steps without crutches. The joy on the child's face and the pride shining in Elena's eyes created a lump in the businessman's throat. At that moment, he realized he was not dealing with a simple housemaid, but with someone with a life purpose far greater than he had ever imagined. The next day, Ricardo confronted Elena once again, but this time with a completely different approach. "Elena, I need to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer," Ricardo said, finding her in the kitchen. "Why have you never told me about your work at the community center?" Elena stopped washing the dishes, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Ricardo, I can explain." "No need to explain. You need to answer me. Do you have an official qualification in physical therapy?" Elena sighed deeply as if preparing for a confession she had been holding back for a long time. "Yes, sir. I graduated in physical therapy 3 years ago from the State University. I studied on a full scholarship while working nights to support myself." The revelation hit Ricardo like a tsunami. "You are a trained physical therapist and you are working as a housemaid. Why?" "Because no one hires a black physical therapist from a peripheral neighborhood without clinical experience in private hospitals," Elena replied with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I sent resumes to dozens of clinics, hospitals, rehabilitation centers. The answer was always the same: lack of experience in suitable environments." Ricardo felt a pang of shame realizing his own contribution to this exclusionary system. How many times had he hired professionals based solely on appearances and recommendations from people in his social circle? "So you accepted working here as a maid knowing you could be practicing your profession?" "I needed the job, sir. And when I saw Daniel, I thought maybe I could help discreetly without anyone knowing. I didn't imagine I would be discovered at that moment." Daniel appeared in the kitchen walking without crutches for the first time since birth. His steps were careful but firm. The boy went directly to Elena and hugged her. "Aunt Elena, I managed to walk here by myself, just like you said I would." Ricardo froze. His son had just walked independently for the first time in his life, and this historic achievement had happened thanks to someone he had treated with disdain and suspicion for months. Elena knelt down to be at Daniel's level. "I knew you could do it, champ. You're the bravest boy I know." Daniel turned to his father, his eyes shining with pride. "Daddy, did you see? I walked by myself. Aunt Elena taught me that I can do anything if I really believe." Ricardo approached his son, knelt down, and hugged him with an intensity he hadn't shown in years. Tears ran down his face as he held Daniel, feeling the strength in his little legs that had once seemed so fragile. "I'm sorry, son," whispered Ricardo. "I'm sorry for not believing in you the way Elena did." Elena watched the emotional scene, but began to step away discreetly. Ricardo called out, "Elena, wait! Don't leave." She stopped, turning with tear-filled eyes. "I owe you an apology, several apologies," Ricardo continued, still holding Daniel. "You gave my son back to me, and I treated you as if you were just another employee." "Mr. Ricardo, no, let me finish. You are far more than I deserve to have in my house. And now I need to find a way to make up for all the injustice I committed." 3 months later, Elena could hardly believe the transformation her life had taken. Ricardo had not only officially promoted her to Daniel's private physical therapist with a salary 5 times higher, but he had also invested heavily in a complete renovation of the São Pedro Community Rehabilitation Center. The once improvised space was now a modern, well-equipped clinic where Elena provided free care to all the children in the community. Ricardo had hired a multidisciplinary team to work under Elena's supervision, to physical therapists, a child psychologist, and an occupational therapist. But the changes didn't stop there. Ricardo began working part-time, dedicating entire afternoons to monitoring Daniel's progress. For the first time in years, father and son developed a genuine connection, playing together, laughing together, dreaming together. Sophia, who had initially resisted the drastic changes in the family dynamic, had now become Elena's greatest advocate. The two women had become close friends, and Sophia frequently accompanied Elena to the community center, volunteering in activities with the children. Daniel, in turn, had become a little celebrity at school. Not only could he walk normally, but he also participated in adapted sports and engaged actively in all activities. More importantly, he had developed unshakable self-confidence and an extraordinary sense of empathy for his age. One special afternoon, Daniel asked to give a presentation at school about his recovery journey. Ricardo and Sophia were in the audience as the boy walked onto the stage firmly, without any assistance. "My name is Daniel Wellington," the boy began, his voice clear and confident. A year ago, I used crutches and thought I would never be able to do the things other kids do. Today, I want to tell you how I learned that limitations exist only in our minds. Daniel told his story simply, but touchingly. He spoke about the difficult days, the sadness he felt, and how Elena came into his life like an angel disguised as a housemaid. He explained how she taught him that every small progress was a victory and that giving up should never be an option. Aunt Elena taught me that it doesn't matter where you come from or what your color is. What matters is the size of your heart and your willingness to help others, Daniel said, looking for Elena in the audience. Today, I walk, run, play soccer, and have even made new friends. But most importantly, I learned to believe in myself. The audience erupted into emotional applause. Ricardo felt pride like he had never experienced before. Not just pride for his son, but also for having had the humility to recognize his mistakes and the wisdom to value Elena. After the presentation, Elena approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. "You were amazing, champ. I'm so proud of you." "Aunt Elena, I have a surprise," said Daniel, taking an envelope from Ricardo's hands. "Daddy helped me write this for you." Elena opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was an official document, a full scholarship for a specialization in pediatric physical therapy at the country's top university, along with a partnership contract for the new rehabilitation center, now to be called the Elena Miguel Institute of Child Therapy. "I can't accept this," murmured Elena, moved. "You can, and you will accept it," said Ricardo, approaching her. "This isn't a favor, Elena, it's justice. It's recognition for everything you've done for my family and dozens of other families in the community." Sophia joined the group, holding Elena's hands. "You're no longer our employee, Elena. You're our family, and family takes care of each other." Miguel, who had been invited to the presentation, hugged his sister proudly. "Elena, you always told me I could achieve anything. Now it's your turn to believe in the impossible." 2 years later, the Elena Miguel Institute had become a national reference in child therapy. Elena had completed her specialization with honors and treated children from all over the country. Her method, which combined scientific techniques with genuine love and creativity, revolutionized traditional rehabilitation concepts. Daniel, now 8 years old, had become the Institute's junior ambassador, visiting schools to speak about inclusion and overcoming challenges. His friendship with Elena remained unbreakable, and he considered her his second mother. Ricardo had learned the most important lesson of his life. The true value of a person is not measured by diplomas, money, or social status, but by the ability to transform lives through love and dedication. Elena had arrived at his home as a housemaid, but revealed herself as a disguised angel sent to teach that miracles happen when we least expect them, through the hands of those we often ignore. The Wellington family story became a powerful reminder that sometimes we need to lose our certainties to find deeper truths, and that life's greatest treasures often come wrapped in the simplicity of those who dedicate their lives to serving others with unconditional love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Black Man Notebook to receive more inspiring content showing how small gestures can transform entire lives.